they're little tiny earbuds, and these are great, big, expensive, big boys. So,
That's the brand.
expensive big boys.
You're making me feel inadequate now with my headphones. I had the biggest headphones on the QUACKCAST.
Do you have headphone envy, Oz?
Yeah, extremely.
I know you were the biggest ones. I was thinking of you first.
You've
And then
emasculated
I'm like,
me now.
wait till he sees. He's gonna, he's gonna be so mad. And you are.
Hello and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST number 530. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me today is Tance, Pitt, and Baines. Hi guys.
Oh, hello. Excuse me.
Hello.
Hello.
So that
Do
is
you
the
see what I see? The theme song for today's topic.
Oh, Jesus, Baines, you're always like 5 steps ahead of the rest of us.
Yes, I've been thinking hard on that.
Damn it, that's a good song. So, this week we're talking about the idea of telling the same story from many different perspectives, which was popularized by the Akira Kurosawa film Rashomon. I don't know if he was the first one to do that, but it has become popularly known as the originator of the trope. So, before we get into that, I have to bring up the featured comic. This week, I featured a comic. Oh, geez, sometimes I do it. Yeah, every second week. It's me, and then it's Kwai. And my feature this week was Huckleberry. So, I'm going to tell you about Huckleberry. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Huckleberry. Move over, Poison Ivy, an even cooler plant-based super person has arrived in town. Well, in the desert town of Chunky Stew rather than Gotham City, and Huckleberry is a hero rather than a villain. You know, like Poison Ivy, she's a villain. Huckleberry is a cool person with some cool powers. Huckleberry can excrete acid from their hands and create a protective seed shell around themselves when under attack. The fruity hero can also run at super speed thanks to tasty banana atoms they give off. But it isn't smooth sailing. There are a lot of enemies that are just raring to fight. Even some that might prove too much for poor Huckleberry. This is a superhero comedy comic. The stories are told in short segments. The art is colourful, charming, and really suits the light tone of the comic well. So yeah, this is a fun little comic. All told in very nice little short segments, so they're very easy and fast to read, and then you're on to the next one, and there's sort of an overarching arc. So they're sort of all part of a wider story and telling the story of Huckleberry's life as Huckleberry grows up in Chunky Stew and finds out about the powers and all about the new villains and the Bright Star. I think there's this other kind of superhero on the horizon there that that Huckleberry is just sort of finding out about. Anyway, I hope you enjoy Huckleberry. This is a comic by Matt Comics and it's rated E for everybody. And that was our featured comic, Huckleberry. Not Huckleberry Hound, which is what I will always associate with that name, Huckleberry, because it's just what I've been indoctrinated to associate that with. Good old Huckleberry.
Not Huck Finn, Huckleberry Hound. That's
That's
their.
I mean, is Huck Finn, is his real name Huckleberry?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Because I grew up watching that as well. I mean, I didn't read it, but I did watch the the TV show, which, tons. You've read it. And now for our featured music. This week, Gun Wallace has given us the theme to Trevor, a black line on the horizon of dense sound builds like a tidal wave, rising higher and higher. As it comes closer and closer, it never breaks, only swamps and envelops you as it rushes past, dragging everything with it, with the enormous power of the ocean behind it, flooding like a rising tide from the sea, drenching you in sound. So take it away, Gun Wallace, with Trevor. And that was Gun Wallace with Trevor, which is the name of the comic by J. Clark Comics, and it's rated A for adults. So this is an adult comic. Read it at your own discretion. Okay, now back onto the QUACKCAST. Of course.
Yeah.
Got all sorts of intellectual giants here who've experienced all the good things that I only...
I haven't read it. I was supposed to read it in school, but like many books in grade school and middle school and all that, I lied.
No, it's
Very bad.
for me it was just a result of basically camping out in the school library for 6 years. You get to read everything. So
yes, you do, but it's embiggening, as the Simpsons would say.
I have even read like Mary Poppins, the book, and
Oh my lord.
yeah, and Peter Pan and all of that super dark stuff that totally is not dark in their screen version. So
I didn't even know Mary Poppins was a book.
it's a series of books, actually.
I did not know that.
Like,
She kills the kids. That's why it's dark.
Yeah, she basically shoves them into a virtual reality and they stay trapped there forever.
like the Wizard of
Okay.
Oz, and also Through the Looking Glass. Those are series of books as well. Which, I mean, well,
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland's only 2, but Wizard of Oz is a whole frickin' bunch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
But I haven't read any of those. There you go. I haven't read those.
Yeah.
oh, they're the bomb. Sorry.
Really?
They're very childish, so it's very hard to read them. The Wizard of Oz ones. Alice in Wonderland, that is not childish, so that's just surreal. But Wizard of Oz is basically aimed at little tiny kids, so it's hard to read as an adult. Very hard to read. Well, let's get back on topic. Stories from different perspectives. I think all of those stories have been done from different perspectives. That's a pretty damn common thing because they're out of copyright, so it's easy. They're very popular. We've had Hook for Peter Pan, which was a pretty cool film, and we've had like all different like versions of like Alice in Wonderland, and but usually alternative takes rather than just from different character
The
perspectives.
point of view remains the same, is what I want to say. Like, even in Hook, the title is about pirates, but the main character still is Peter Pan. So,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah, I never noticed that before. Hook is kind of... That's misleading, isn't it?
disappointing. Dustin Hoffman was fantastic as Captain Hook.
but that would have been interesting. Like, I would see a movie where Hook is actually the main character.
Especially when Dustin Hoffman was playing him.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. I
Mm-hmm.
think there has been slightly different versions. I mean, there's a version of Peter Pan where we show how Captain Hook became Captain Hook and lost his hand and all that
You
stuff.
know what? But the Maleficent is basically a different perspective.
Yeah.
And now I think Cruella
Snow
de
White.
Vil is coming out, which is
Yeah.
another different perspective. I don't really appreciate it, to be honest, but it is a different perspective and a different take.
I hope they don't try to make her like, oh, now you understand why she does what she does. Like,
Oh, that's exactly what
I love Cruella de Vil as a villain. She's one of my very favorite Disney villains. She doesn't need to be fixed, you know, but as long as they don't try to do that, I'll see it, I guess.
We've had different versions of Wizard of
Unfortunately, that's
Oz.
what they try to do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with Maleficent. Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do.
That's the main reason that I didn't actually like Maleficent. It's because she didn't need to be an anti-hero and not a very efficient one at that. I mean, she could have been so gloriously evil and have just the main character be a villain. Like, it's a thing, guys. You can do that. You can have the main character be a villain.
Yeah.
Just like that.
That sounds like a way more. I mean, I haven't seen it. I don't even know if it's out yet. But the villain sounds like so much more fun to watch.
Yeah. Especially villains that are so happy to be villainous. Like,
Awesome.
they enjoy it. They are very much aware that they are the villains.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they love every minute of it.
Have you guys?
That's one of the reasons why I love Cruella de Vil, because I mean, she's out there to fucking kill puppies, and she knows it. She loves it. That's all she wants to do is kill puppies and make coats out of them.
Well, we had Mr. Burns being See my coat. See my coat. See my
Yeah.
Yeah.
See my vest, see my vest, made
vest,
from
it's-
real gorilla's chest. See my sweater, there's no better than authentic Irish sweater. See my hat, 'twas my cat, my evening wear, vampire pet. Very, something African, endangered rhino, grizzly bear, underwear, turtles necks, I got my share. Brave poodle on my doodle, it shall rest. Check out my red robin suit, it comes one breast or two. See my vest, see my vest, see my vest.
yeah, I knew you'd know that. I knew it.
Bravo.
See my loafers, former gophers. It was but something. But my greyhound fur tuxedo would be best. So let's prepare these dogs. Kill two for matching clogs. See my vest. See my vest. Oh, please, won't you see my vest? I really like my vest.
Dear. That was in the episode where
Yay.
he wanted Santa's little helpers puppies, I think.
Yeah.
It was taken from that tune.
I didn't know that. No. I just realized it. That's an awesome song. But yeah, I mean, just that's a different take. Like, I would love to see you are changing perspectives in the story, but you are also changing the character. And I think that doesn't really qualify in the sense that I would love to see the perspective of a villain that is a villain and loves to be a villain because that's how they were built originally. Like they
Have any of
love
you
it.
guys seen Wicked, which was the musical version of well, it's the story of the Wizard of Oz told from the perspective of the witches, and it's a musical. It's a Broadway hit.
I haven't want to. I haven't.
I'd like to too. Yeah.
Okay, because that's another interesting.
I read
thing.
part of the book, but got bored. I'm gonna try again someday.
Sorry, which book did you read?
That is
Wicked.
Oh, there's a book of it. Okay.
Yeah, the musical might have been first. I don't know. But,
Interesting.
I think that Wicked is the culprit for all the reimaginings of all the villains as misunderstood.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not a movie already. It's kind of shocking.
Yeah, actually, why not? I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Green Lady.
there was a TV series about. So there's been many TV series about Wizard of Oz, but there was one that was on, I think it was Netflix. And so this one, the characters sort of jump to a different reality, and the Wizard of Oz is this loser guy who messes up the experiment, and he sort of becomes the wizard because he knows technology and science. And basically, so the whole story of this thing is this guy comes in with science and basically ruins magic, and he sort of fascistly imposes his will on the witches, and who used to be, had the power because they were the sources of all the magic, and now he's replaced it with his crude science. So he's the bad man ruining this matriarchy, the good matriarchy, that everything worked and it was all lovely and stuff like that. So that's sort of in an alternative take on the story, and was a bit, it wasn't bad. It had some good actors, but the political kind of perspective was a bit on the nose because it had been done so many times. But you're changing the story to you're changing the story to do that, and the Wizard of Oz wasn't meant to be like a despoiler. It wasn't meant to be the source of destruction for the lands. Like, he wasn't that important, and now you're sort of raising up his importance, and so I don't like the way it alters the fabric of the story.
What I would want to ask on that is, why are they portraying magic as inferior to technology?
Well, they're not. Like, the magic is superior to technology. It's just that the technology.
So why are the witches submitting to the technology guy then?
I cannot remember how they did it. They used some kind of trickery, like he's making it so like destruction's going to rain down on the world if people use magic, so he forced his will upon
But
them.
why do they accept it? It's like,
because it's destruction. Everything's going to be destroyed if they use magic and if they unleash
why
their powers.
are they buying it? They have been using magic for so long.
Because now he's sort of like there's basically like there's a nuclear bomb. Like this is a metaphor I'm using. I'm not saying there is literally a nuclear bomb, but in their world, it's basically a nuclear bomb is going to go off and destroy everything if they're going to unleash their powers and use magic. So that's why they have to submit, because he's used his scientific technology knowledge in order to make it impossible for them to use their magic. So that's how it was able to be done. If you get my meaning?
I would need to read it / see it. I don't know.
Oh, it's a series, so you might enjoy it. It starts off quite interesting. It's just when they reveal the sort of the reasons for everything, then it gets a little less interesting. Like always when you tell the story and it's a lot smaller because it's the perspective of the characters working out the world is always a lot more interesting than when you're sort of told the bigger picture, which is always takes away the mystery. So that's when it starts to get a bit more boring.
I don't know. I mean, I would need to experience the story for myself, I guess, to see if I can buy the premise in the first place.
It's on Netflix, though, so you can't.
All right.
We'll need an alternative take on Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or something.
But going back to the theme of different perspectives, personally, I haven't really seen a lot of works where different perspectives are used, but I would expect that using different perspectives could, like from the compare and contrast between the points of view of different characters, you could perhaps see different commentaries on the same thing, in the sense of like, you may see it one way, but the other character sees it a different way, and then perhaps you can draw different themes from the same thing, or even learn to not be very one-sided when discussing things in real life or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating here.
You can. Some stories will do that within their structure. Like I was just thinking the idea of telling the same story from different perspectives, as in like an alternative take. But some stories will like give us multiple characters, and it won't be like a stylistic thing. We'll just switch to this character, switch to that character, switch to that character, and the story will sort of just have like slight overlaps, and we'll have a totally different perspective when it gets to that character for when it gets to this character. So that happens.
Some video games do that, like the old Resident Evil games and stuff. When you play different characters, you get different sides of the story, or like what was happening while this character was supposedly doing this, then your character does this and stuff. Anyway, I think that's cool.
Famous, great fun character, Starcraft. That was because that was really kind of a like a really famous one, because you had 3 different groups: Protoss, Zerg, and humans. And you start off like just being the humans, and it's a strategy game, real-time strategy. So you set up your bases and you start mining, get resources, build your weapons and stuff like that. And you're the humans, and you become invested in the human story. And then you reach the end of their campaign, it switches you over to the Protoss, I think. And then, oh my god, you got a totally different perspective, and now you hate the humans. Before you loved them and you were annoyed by the Protoss and the Zerg, but now you're the Protoss. And then at the end of that, it switches over to the Zerg, this disgusting organic alien monsters. They're just revolting. And now suddenly you love them and you hate the pesky humans and the pesky Protoss for destroying all your stuff. And you have the different psychological perspective of these characters and, how they think of the world. You become invested in the way they see things. So that was a really good way of having the whole, story from 3 different perspectives in a video game. So, yeah, that's a good thing to bring up, Pit. Video games do that pretty well. Not all of them, but some.
Wasn't there from Breaking Bad you had then Better Call Saul? I haven't seen either of all these things, but they are, I'm guessing, different perspectives.
Yeah.
Or is it just
Are they?
Yeah, well, Better Call Saul is a prequel, so it doesn't really cross much with the Breaking Bad timeline. But this is kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's a side character now taking center stage, where he was a comic relief character, and you really saw him. You saw Saul in his function as a lawyer. He was really funny. He was very capable, and driven by superficial needs only. And now with the prequel, you're seeing sort of a deeper side to him, and it's really good because they're taking great pains. You'd probably love it, actually, Tense, because they take great pains to sort of show, not tell, but show sort of the psychology and what he went through to kind of make him become the guy he was on Breaking Bad, and how he sort of dissociates, if I'm using that term right, from his emotions, and where there was a whole human being there, but he becomes motivated and very capable at kind of setting aside his emotions and his pain and deeper thoughts, and he does it kind of on purpose. So anyway, but yeah, not necessarily. We'll see in the last season if we're seeing scenes that we never saw in Breaking Bad. Maybe we'll reach that timeline. But it is a different character taking center stage, and a lot of the same supporting characters. So you see different angle. Actually, you see different angles on pre-existing characters. Actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. So there was his enforcer guy.
Different character. Sorry.
Is he in it? From Breaking Bad, Saul had this enforcer kind of guy. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Mike. He's in it too. So you kind of see where he was at a few years before Breaking Bad. Which is cool.
Police officer he started out as, I think, from memory.
Yeah, we don't go back that far, but
right.
You sort of see how he became the ice cold dude he is in Breaking Bad. He's not quite there in Better Call Saul. He might be close, but yeah, you see that journey, and you see different sides of Gus, the character Gus, who was a big villain in Breaking Bad. You see more of him, a few years younger also, which is cool. So you do see new dimensions and new perspectives on these people, and that's written with great care, so the consistency is mostly there.
Right. That's an important thing. Well, speaking of great care, that was something that were... an alternative topic I was thinking about was the whole Marvel films and how they build a great big coherent story from all different parts, but it remains very nicely crafted and everything fitting together. But Marvel also has a bunch of films that overlap. So you do, we talked about this in a bit in the QUACKCAST Patreon video, but it's worth repeating again because that was a major motion picture event. It's defined even cinema globally for the last few years, and these are films where we do get different characters' perspectives on the same situation at the same time. And if you watch all the films, you pick that up more and more. The whole events of the Civil War are also what start out the events of Black Panther. But Black Panther really begins in the 1980s when Captain Marvel also begins. Getting all sorts of weird overlaps in these movies, and that's an interesting perspective on the stuff that's happening. You know, the scenes of Ant-Man sort of happen at the same time as the Spider-Man films and all this other stuff. So,
right,
yeah, you've got this happening on a big scale.
When you shift perspectives, even if you keep a character consistent, and the character happens to be negative or whatever, there is an element or a level, at least, where the character will be a little bit more sympathetic, simply for the reason that we can see their inner motivations and their inner thoughts a little more. And I'm saying that because back in the day when I still I was a Harry Potter fan, because before the whole thing came down and collapsed for me. I mean, and I couldn't just have that what I had before. Anyway, I had an experiment because I used to read a lot of fan fiction and stuff, and usually they had either of two takes. Either they had fan fiction of the main antagonist, which was Snape, becoming super, super out of character good, like engaging in behaviors that the character at least wouldn't, as in canon, would never engage in, or becoming super, super diabolical, and like nobody could hit a sweet spot with this character without altering the actual behavior. So I did an experiment where I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to have strictly the character behave as canon, but I will make them sympathetic if I can. And the way I did it was by telling the story through his perspective only. And so it was in a first person, where the first person that was the narrator was Snape himself, talking about things, but behaving extremely consistently as he would behave, like being rude, being cutting, being basically a jerk in everything, all of that. And the thing is that everyone found him super sympathetic. They may not have liked what he did, but they understood why he did it, which you don't get when the character is not the main character. You get just the impact of their behavior more than anything else. So that's an element that one should consider, that you can switch perspectives to give the point of view more sympathetic take, or explore motivations, that sort of thing. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you can do that kind of stuff. You can basically flesh out a character and flesh out your story as well. It's quite helpful. Speaking of the whole alternative stuff, I was watching an anime series. It's called, I brought this up before, like before we did the QUACKCAST. It's called "Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?" I think that's the title. And the title really doesn't bear on the show very much. It's not really, you think, oh, is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon? And you automatically think it's a bit sleazy, but it's not at all. It's the lead character is far too cowardly for that kind of behavior, fortunately. But yeah, so it mainly focuses on this main character, Bell something or other, this kid with white hair, and he's becoming starts off being a very weak adventurer, and he basically idolizes this girl, and he wants to become as strong as her, and he uses her basically as the goal that he would like to achieve. He would like to one day catch up and be as strong as her. So that's his kind of motivation. And there's a couple of series sort of, you have him as the main character. There's first series, second series, third series, and they sort of go along with him sort of building up his strength and up his sort of gang and stuff like that. But the latest series of this cartoon just focuses on the girl instead. So instead of being all about this boy and what he was doing, now it focuses on this girl he was idolizing and what she was doing at the same time. So it focuses on what she was doing at the same time as he was going through his first series. So it's the first series told again from her perspective, or at least the perspective of her and her gang. And it's not as good, unfortunately. It's interesting to see the story from a different perspective, but the story itself isn't as good. And the reason for that is because when you're seeing a story from the perspective of someone who's weak and getting stronger and building up, that is inherently quite interesting because you insert yourself into that character, and the whole experience of starting out weak and then growing is quite an interesting, engaging, relatable experience. But when you tell the story of a character who is already at the peak, who is already super strong, that's just not as engaging. That's just not as interesting. It's very hard to make that as engaging as, a character who's beginning, even when it's the same sort of events and set in the same world. It's just doesn't have the same feeling. That actually makes it worse because you've got those things to compare directly against. If it was a completely different story, it might not be as bad, but because it's the same story, the same point in time, you're starting to, you can directly compare them, and you can think, oh, well, actually, the beginner story is more interesting than this character was overpowered and their lust to get even stronger, which is just not as fun. But yeah, anyway.
I mean, it does make sense. That's the classic kind of character arc, right? That's the hero's journey where someone becomes like they're average or below average or less than in some way, and then they become,
exactly. They sort of grow into
the great
themselves.
version of themselves.
Yeah, which is inherently engaging. But I will say that watching, because it'd been maybe a couple of years since I saw the first take on this same story. So I watched this later take on it, and I realized, hang on, that interests me enough to go back and watch the first one again. So basically, I'm watching all the same story kind of elements, but again from the first character's perspective after watching it from this character's perspective. And so that, even though it wasn't as fun watching it with the girl character, it still made it a lot more fun to go back and watch the original. So
yeah,
there's that. Maybe that was the point of it. Who knows? To sort of get people back into the story. So yeah, there can be multiple points to things. There can be hidden motivations to creating stories like that. Anyway, how about you guys? Have you seen a story that's played with multiple perspectives that you've really enjoyed?
Well, I love Back to the Future too. It's one of my favorite movies, which I get mocked for.
Oh my god, friends. Yeah, that's a good point, Bruno. It didn't really fit with time loops, but it fits with this.
Right. Yeah, and it was an early. I mean, I already kind of got it because I was a comic book guy. So back in the day, so I knew about crazy time travel and multiple versions of people and all this kind of stuff. But in a big movie, that was an early experience of and it still is fairly unusual, I think, to go back in Back to the Future Part 2, spoiler alert, in the last act of that movie, they go back in time to the 1950s where a lot of the action of the first movie took place. So there's the first movie that exists, and the characters can't do anything that'll change the first movie. This is the meta reality, I guess, because you have to be able to go back, watch the first movie, and it can't be changed. Like all of that has to play out as it is for in-universe reasons. And also, I thought like for the audience, like I have to be able to watch the first one and imagine that all this extra stuff is going on with a duplicate Marty and a duplicate Doc running around doing what they have to do, and seeing themselves, whereas the original versions can't see the new versions. And anyway, I'm explaining this so terribly, but yeah, like they're able to look at themselves and look at some of the events, the classic events of the first movie, as almost an audience. Well, they're hiding from themselves, and we're seeing different angles on these events. So always great.
Specifically, I think there was the classic scene with Marty and Chuck Berry kind of performance, and then you have the different Marty behind the scenes in the same Chuck Berry performance, sort of sneaking around and like getting involved with Biff and the bullies and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, it takes place in between the scenes that we saw.
Yeah.
Like, where was Biff before he attacked, Marty's mom or whatever? He was drinking over here. Whatever.
Exactly. It was very clever, very cleverly planned and plotted out. It kind of spoils a bit of the first film, but that doesn't matter because you've already seen the first film and you've become invested in the second film. So, I mean, if you'd watched the second film first, then it would take away the impact of the pivotal scenes from the first film. But, you're not meant to.
Yeah, it would also wouldn't mean anything. Like you have to know the first film.
Oh yeah.
For it to make any sense. Like otherwise it would just be like, what? Like what the hell's going on? And a lot of people watch that movie and have that reaction anyway, but yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting because we're talking about the same scenes from different perspectives, and the automatic thing is to think of same scenes from perspectives of different characters. But this is the same scenes from perspective of the same character, but time traveling. So
yeah,
he sees it from different angles. So yeah, it's a really interesting version of that kind of thing. But yeah, what about the same things from different characters' perspectives? Did you enjoy?
Well, I'm having trouble thinking of a lot of examples. There was a Star Trek episode, of course there would be. Next Generation, where there's some kind of an explosion that kills a scientist, and Riker was on the planet from the Enterprise with the Enterprise crew to help with this experiment, and there's some suspicion about or there's a big question about what happened to this guy, how the explosion happened, how the scientist died. So there's a bit of a trial, and they use like the holodeck to do recreations according to each person's point of view. So you have Riker, you have the scientist's wife. I think mostly it's from their two perspectives, and you have various events. So when they first met, and you see the wife's version. In the wife's version, Riker is like very like sexually aggressive towards her, and he's like very rude and kind of a brutish version of himself. And in Riker's version, she's like very aggressive towards him, and he's like very professional. And so I think there are 3 or 4 scenes that you see from each of their perspectives, where like in hers, he's pretty much a rapist. And in his, like, it's all her initiating, and he's like just resisting, and the husband, in both versions, the husband walks in on them.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I think I remember
that's an interesting one. You get literally a Rashomon story, played out in the Star Trek world. So a lot of shows have done that kind of thing. But that one was,
yeah, I like that.
It's fine. Yeah.
I think there's been a few where we've got trials, and they do that from different characters' perspective. Like you have the classic trial episode, then you have witnesses talking about what happened, and it's completely different according to whichever witness is recounting the events. I remember they did that in Farscape. If anyone remembers, well, you should. Everybody should just go and watch Farscape because it's an Australian-made sci-fi series from the 90s or early 2000s, and it is freaking brilliant. The guys behind Jim Henson's company was behind it, so it's got like movie quality effects and animatronics and costumes, and it's just the best sci-fi ever. But they did a classic episode where they did a trial, and someone was standing trial, I can't remember which, and all the different characters got to tell about, got to be witnesses on the trial and tell about the same thing that happened from all their different perspectives. So in that aspect, we've got all the characters, like, according to their own personalities, portraying themselves as the main character or the hero of the story, and the whole story takes on a very different character depending on who's telling it. And so normally have a character who's rather bumbling and silly and comic relief. Suddenly they're the imperious kind of hero of the story, and everyone else is the bumbling character, comic relief kind of characters. So that is very entertaining when you do that kind of story, and I absolutely love that, and very much that happened in this particular story. I must go and rewatch it. Everyone should actually watch it for the first time, because I know none of you have, you bastards. Farscape. Fantastic.
I've seen a bit of it. I like it, but I don't know the show very well.
Oh, it's probably the best TV sci-fi that was ever made. Firefly? What's Firefly? I wouldn't wipe my bum with Firefly. Farscape is really where it's at. Should have had more than 4 seasons. So yeah, that was a classic one. News Radio, which was a really cool sitcom starring Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall, and Phil Hartman, all sorts of... Joe Rogan started out in that obnoxious kind of guy who does radio and TV and podcasts. I think he's a real dick now, but yeah, he was a character in News Radio. Anyway, there's a particular episode where all the characters sort of relate something from all their different perspectives, and the story takes on a very different character depending on who's talking about what's happening. Oh yeah, Pitt has given us the example of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction very much is a very classic movie that does this, different perspectives. I had not even thought about that. That's good, Pitt.
And Reservoir Dogs as well, which also is very constructive. Like the different perspectives are what push forward the plot. Good thinking, Pitface.
Yeah, I haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, unfortunately, but I have seen.
It's so good.
Yeah, you should. I don't know. I mean, is it in other style though? I don't know.
It depends. Because I mean, it can be quite intense, and you have an aversion, being the sane person that you are, not the evil, twisted asshole. You have an aversion to human suffering, and there's a deal of human suffering in this. But it's really good. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, but yeah, Pulp Fiction is one where we definitely have the multiple characters' perspective, and they overlap, which is the important thing. So you have Jules, and I can't remember all the different characters' names. You know, the Bruce Willis's character, who's trying not to get shot, and the two hitmen, and Uma Thurman's character, and all this kind of stuff that was overlapping perspectives. That's a very clever story. Yeah, that was a good one. I'm trying to think of...
Yeah, that's the kind that I would love to do a story like that in my comic. I don't know if I'd want to do a Rashomon thing, personally, although they're neat. But the Pulp Fiction kind of thing, where it's a puzzle, and like everyone's experiences, like you have these common events that cross over, but then when you see the full story, that's what makes it kind of complete and way more entertaining.
Yeah.
They cross paths here and there. Like I love that kind of stuff. I think it'd be challenging to put it all together, but
where
really
it worked for Rashomon was the narrative, because it made sense to have all those different views in that narrative, because it's a trial and they're getting the story from, of what happened during this event, from multiple sources. And it's really good. I recommend it. I mean, it's a classic, obviously. And yeah, there are probably a couple things that, being an older movie, that are not up to date today, but it still stands as a really good movie, and with a very I like the ending of it a lot. I won't say it, but it's one of those very satisfying in a way endings, even if it might not end exactly the way that you would want it. Anyway, but yeah, it's able to have all those different perspectives because the narrative demands that it does so. Whereas, it's hard to be able to do that and not have it be a gimmick, to tell the same story but over and over again from different perspectives.
Yeah.
That could potentially be boring if you only do it for that, just to have a gimmick. Yeah, definitely. I think it would be boring then, because what you do have with different perspectives, if you do it like that, you have the same plot said over and over again. Whereas if in my opinion at least, I haven't ever really sat down to construct a story like that, but I would expect that each perspective should add to the plot as originally experienced by the first point of view character. So it should bring new things to the table instead of just regurgitating the same things. So
yeah, a story still has to build, and it has to like that's the extra challenge. I think it makes me think there's actually a classic X-Files episode where Mulder has one version, Scully has one version. It's hilarious.
They're the skeptic and the believer.
Their personalities between the. Yeah, well, I mean, the great part of it is like how obnoxious Mulder is in Scully's version, and how obnoxious Scully is in Mulder's version. And there's a bit of an explanation of why their perceptions would be so skewed.
Yeah.
But it's great, really funny.
The Usual Suspects is a famous film that does the whole multiple perspective thing. That's Kevin Spacey film. A whole lot of great actors in that one. To Kaiser Soze, so you have to, who's Kaiser Soze? And all the characters have this very different perspective on who this Kaiser Soze character is, and they build him up to be this, diabolical, villainous, monstrous character. And it's that's fascinating. You find out who he is in the end, but the journey along the way of these characters sort of, outlining their different versions of him and their place in his plot is fascinating. So that's a awesome film, The Usual Suspects. Have any of you guys seen that one?
Oh yeah, and it definitely plays with perception and perspectives and all that stuff. I don't really want to spoil anything, but yeah, it's really neat and spawned like multitudes of imitators by
Gabriel
the way it
Byrne
approached.
is in it too.
Yeah, great actors. Kevin Pollak is really good.
Yeah.
Benicio Del Toro, one of his early movies. He's
you can't understand the freaking thing he says in that film.
Yeah. The behind the scenes stories about that movie are hilarious because all the other actors complained about him. So like, we can't understand like what his character's saying. But then you go back and watch. They went back and watched the movie, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he's amazing. It's like actually really funny, and you can understand what he's saying."
So yeah, that
fine,
was
I guess.
one I highly recommend everyone. Farscape and Usual Suspects. You've got your homework for you bastards. Yeah.
Yes, and I'll recommend the X-Files Vampire episode, whatever the title was. I don't remember.
Yeah, and that Star Trek one is so cool. Well, I have to watch Reservoir Dogs. That's my one that I have to see. I still haven't seen that bloody film. How many people have actually gone back and told different stories in a film from a different perspective? I think that's happened a couple of times. I can't really think of examples now, but I think people have done that.
People have done it. So as we've been talking about it, I've actually tried to Google search it because it's weird. I thought that I would have come up with a million examples by now, but it's been really hard to think of any. And there are some out there, but they're mostly like things that I haven't really seen. But for the most part, it seems like this isn't something as explored as you might think it is. Like, you more so get like alternative realities or like that kind of thing where where like the view of one character might change, like we thought it was like this, but it ended up like this instead. But it's actually not that often you get the multiple characters. You get the same thing from multiple characters, and that really surprises me, actually.
Well, you did get that famously with, I think Clint Eastwood didn't start a film, directed films about the guys who raised the flag over Iwo Jima, I think.
Yeah.
And then he did another film from the Japanese perspective. I haven't seen him, so I don't
know. Flag of our... Wait, what was it again?
Something over Iwo Jima.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen it though, so I'm not gonna say
I think that does.
I forgot I have the microphone by my mouth now, so I was sitting back and saying that, but it's right here.
So we're gonna get all your swearing and calling us names and things.
Shit. Dirty
Motley.
horse. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big screen version of this stuff, but I think it's been done in Futurama a few times. But that's the whole, like, doing your Back to the Future kind of stuff, Baines. Going back and telling the story from a different perspective by sticking Fry and Leela, like, overlapping them in the same story. Which is, an interesting trick.
Right, yeah. They've gone back in time and stuff.
But I think, Back to the Future 2 originated that, and everyone else is sort of imitating it. Like Bill and Ted. In the Bill and Ted films, it's
Bill and Ted, it was built right into the movie.
About last time we in the time loop thing, Bill and Ted do that in the second films a lot, but yeah, in the first film they do it with the like, oh, we've got to have a bucket here this time, and their characters sort of...
And they meet themselves. Like at the beginning of the movie, they meet themselves, and then you're with the guys who don't know anything. Obviously, that's your perspective as an audience member in the beginning. And then you get the scene again, or part of it. They don't regurgitate. Yeah. Like, obviously, they cut stuff out. But you're with the more experienced Bill and Ted. The second time they meet, you see the same scene. That one, that's great. And, like, it's built that way. What I love about the Back to the Future thing is it wasn't built ahead of time. They didn't know they were making part 2. Mm-hmm. So, like, part 1 already existed, and now with part 2, they have to figure it out after the fact, which I do appreciate about that.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, and they had to structure it in, which was very tricky and clever. Like, it had to retrofit it.
Yeah.
There have been. I'm thinking that there have been stories where people have wanted to do like a sequel, but they didn't do a sequel, so they did like an alternative take on the same thing with a different character, and they just said, yeah, it's not a sequel, it's just a different take of the same character. But it's hard to think because you see 7 million things in the world through your experience, and you can't really remember every single friggin' movie you've seen. What about comics? This is not something I think you would see it in comics a lot, like in print comics, because as we were talking about, like with the Marvel stuff, and we've got concurrent events that happen all the time in comics. I mean, that's where all these like comics movies come from print comics. So they have actually done, like event comics, I think they call them. Both DC and Marvel do them, for the Justice League and also the Avengers, where an event happens across multiple comics. So it's the same thing happening, but okay, this is the same thing, but in the Captain America franchise, and then the same thing happens, and it's in the Iron Man franchise, or we're going for the Justice League, it's the Batman comics, and then we've got a crossover event happening in the Flash or something. So the same thing has to happen.
I seem to recall that something like that happening with the death of Spider-Man, I think, which like half the story was from Spider-Man's perspective and the other half was from Captain America and a couple of other people, like I think the Punisher as well, somewhere in there, which basically advances the story through different perspectives. So you have like a few issues in one franchise, and then another few issues in another, and then it concludes with Spider-Man himself until he dies. I think that he's back now or something like that. I don't know. But what I noticed is that it tended to piss people off in the sense that they felt that it was more like a gimmick to get people to buy multiple books from different franchises rather than actually something that contributed something to the story. I wouldn't know because I'm not that much of a fan. So for me, it felt like, okay, we're following this story in this manner. Yeah. Okay. I don't remember it feeling like a different story from the different perspectives. It felt like the same perspective, just via camera shifted angles. So maybe it's not the best example.
It's an interesting version of the idea. I remember in novels, famously, we have the Orson Scott Card, who made a huge splash with his Ender's Game story. And he turned that into a bit of a franchise and created a few more books in that series, but told in very different ways. Like he changed style completely when he did the sequel to Ender's Game. So you got a young adult science fiction adventure story, space opera almost, and the second story is like an incredibly like sad sort of psychological family drama sort of thing happening, and then the next book again is like takes an even different take on that. And it's was very interesting just from those kind of things. But these are direct linear sequels. But then he created another story series about this character called Bean, who was a side character in the first book, Ender's Game. So now what he did the whole multiple perspective thing. So instead of focusing on Ender as the main character, now we focus on Bean, which was a side character, and telling the story from his perspective. And I felt that it really failed because you've got this original story with Ender as the hero, and he's like the gold boy, oh my god, he's like this secret genius, and he becomes like the big hero of the story and everything, and it's establishes him as being this interesting sort of character. But then he tells it from Bean's perspective, and it's like, oh, hang on, Ender was really a freaking loser, and it was only through the Bean secretly supporting him all the way. And Bean was really the secret mastermind, and he made everything happen. And it's not like, these different perspective stories, how the character makes themselves out to be a hero, because it's not that kind of a story. It's not told from a first-person perspective that I remember. It's, the usual third-person perspective sort of thing. So it's the author making this character out to be the true hero, which is really annoying because it undermines this story. And Ender's Game isn't just, a young adult fiction story. It is like, was good enough to become really well known and loved. So it's a really, really good kind of story that sort of strikes a chord. And he's gone and undermined that, which makes it a worse crime, than just doing like some anonymous story that no one really cared about. So yeah, he's gone and cut it off at the knees with this Inferior story about this character called Bean, who is like a typical mastermind. Like he's extra short, he's got some big head, or maybe he's autistic or something. He's like some character who has got some handicap, but is even more brilliant because of it. That kind of a trope. Like, yeah. So it's very tropey, and it just totally undermines everything, because it takes a lot of like the classic scenes from Ender's Game and it goes, haha, you thought that was clever? It wasn't really clever, because this is what really happened. And for an author to do that, it's dickish. Well, I mean, Orson Scott Card is a bit of a dick, so there's that. Well, he's a bit of a dick because he's anti-gay or something. I can't remember, but yeah.
He played his Orson reverse card.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Orson is not awesome. But yeah, Ender's Game is still a good book. Just don't... read Ender's Game and the sequels, but don't read the Bean books, because you'll be disappointed. Unless you're a masochist, or someone who likes Star Wars prequels.
All depends on your perspective.
Yeah, that's true.
Haven't you learned through this episode? From a certain point of view.
Yeah, a terrible point of view. All right, well, we've sort of covered this subject. We should wrap it up then. Alrighty.
Hooray!
Hooray.
Now it's your turn to tell us what you think. No, I don't know.
What's your perspective?
How do you experience the quack chat?
Yes. Is it an earache or a headache or both? Let us know.
And if it is, why are you listening?
There is no alternative. You can't. There's no other perspective on that. You have to listen. All right. Thank you very much for that. Bye-bye, people.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.